Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. All right, welcome back to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. We are sitting live at Autodesk University. I'd say halfway through the final day of the event, and everybody is fired up. I have the pleasure of being joined by Thiago Da Costa, the co-founder and CEO of Toric. And today we're going to be talking about gaps in data connectivity and how to monetize data in construction, which I think is an interesting and unique approach. And I really like your framing, so I'm excited to hear a bit more about it. So Thiago, how are you doing today? How are you feeling?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here. I love the show. So many great guest speakers have been here. So looking forward to contribute to it and talk about data.
Yeah, man, I'm a big data nerd. I talk about it all the time, and I'm welcoming of any more opportunities to have more of these conversations and have a meaningful dive on what folks can do, what they should be doing, and where we're headed in the future. So let's jump straight in today. I've got a first question for you today. What do you think some of the biggest gaps are when it comes to data connectivity in the construction industry? And how are they impacting our ability to deliver projects and the teams working on them? Like, where does that all fit in? Where are the big gaps?
That's an awesome question. There's so many gaps, so I'm just going to try to talk about the top ones I think that are important to the audience and everybody that wants to learn about data. I think the first one is just how we grew with data as an industry. We started off on pen and paper. It's a very old industry. Then we evolved into spreadsheets. And then finally we got into digital software tools that do specialized things. And that created an environment, a very fragmented environment and a very uneven environment. So some software is 20 years old. Others are, a couple years old. So you have very different quality of data being created in these tools. And that comes with simple things as, required fields, which fields are required in a form. So if you don't have that data, you didn't capture it and you won't have it. So it comes down to what's the quality of the information that's being generated, who is generating it, because in the past, we didn't have a lot of people generating data, but now every superintendent is generating data every day, even every foreman, every plumber, everyone is generating a ton of data. So the explosion of data is huge, and that causes this gap. Like the data is uneven. And the tools that we're using, they are all different, have different qualities to them. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is the tools weren't designed to talk to each other or to work together. So how do you overcome that? Because every company is using dozens of tools to make a building. So overcoming that challenge is a big part of it, just figuring out how to leverage it. And then I think the third gap is just the alignment of the importance of data. Right? If your company is not aligned that you have to actually improve your data operations, then that you have to just save money and be more cost efficient all the time, instead of providing more value through data, then you might actually be missing an opportunity. So these are all the things that I think are impacting the ability for people to deliver better projects, I guess, with data.
It's such an interesting situation that we find ourselves in with data, because as you so thoughtfully pointed out, we went from not much generated data to so many purpose-built tools, and it was inevitable to end up in this very overwhelming moment where all of a sudden everybody is empowered, and it's exciting to be empowered to generate this data with the tools they're using.
Yeah.
But our teams have to step out of that shiny new toy chasing moment and say, where are we aligning our data on? What kind of a common data environment are we having? And the encouraging thing from my perspective in hearing how leaders talk about this is they are talking about this to begin with, because many of them worked for a long time or they weren't asking the right questions. But now they're starting to shift. They're starting to see, okay, I need to be more strategic and more intentional about how I do this, because this is not just going to impact how we make some of our decisions, but it's also a predictability conversation. It's a future-focused conversation. So we're really at an exciting moment right now. But I'd love it if you could go a little bit deeper and tell me more how is this impacting folks' ability to deliver on these projects? So we have these data gaps. The teams are starting to work on them. I think we're starting to find some solutions, but like what is this really doing to the industry when you have this fragmentation that you're talking about?
I think ultimately it's going to come down to like how efficient the project is in terms of producing outcomes for the company, how much you can extract from a project, how effective can your teams be, because you just don't know what drives that, and you don't know what conditions are the ideal conditions for your company. So maybe, picking up on this project and putting this project manager and working with this architect, maybe that's not going to be a great thing for the company, and you won't know. And if you compare to other industries, which is the easiest way to do this, is to think, how did healthcare become so efficient? How did banking become so efficient? If you look at every healthcare company, they are not just leveraging data. Like, data is actually central to them, right? And in construction, accounting is central, and finance is central, because it's such a big part of making sure that you deliver the building, deliver the project. I think the impact ultimately monetary is just you're not making as much money as you could because you have skipped on efficiencies for years. And then now everybody's used to do it in this way. And you got to retrain people, you got to change tool set, you got to figure that out. And data has evolved so quickly that I think construction is now hit with AI on top of it. So now you haven't really had a CD, a centralized place to put your data. You haven't had any data practices. You haven't had any data governance for years. And then all of a sudden you want to do AI. So that's the impact. The impact is that you're not going to be able to keep up with whoever's been investing in it for a while. So I think that's the rush, is like, how do you catch up quickly so that you can become more of a data organization, and an organization can rely on it as a way to better create outcomes, financial outcomes for the company, in my opinion. And there's the side effects of it. Like, for example, safety is one of them. If you can improve your safety, you can get better insurance. If you can prove that you keep your safety low, you can, use that to, get better premiums. So how do you do all of that? Like, it has to be through data, because that's what the brokerage company is going to want. That's what the insurer is going to want. So it kind of is every facet of the business, and then figuring out which one is the first that creates that advantage that you start seeing results. Because data is a long game. It's a team sport, it's a long game. The whole company has to be committed to it. And it's a top-down decision. It's not, if you have a couple of dashboards somebody built, that's cool. But, ultimately, is the entire executive leadership team decided that you're not just making buildings, you're actually like managing these projects for a better outcome, and you're using data as a key way to do it.
And it's an opportunity for organizations, and that's really what I like to lean on, because it's easy to look at this, especially if your data journey isn't very mature, and be very overwhelmed. It feels a little scary. You go, okay, I'm a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar general contractor, and we haven't set up our standards, so our projects are consistently capturing data. There's a culture behind that narrative, because you need to convince folks why they need to be doing it in a certain way. But you also need to show them that they're going to gain value too. And I'm excited right now, because this is going to end in a state where not just the VDC team, who are really, tech forward, or your data team specifically, is empowered to use data.
Yeah.
Everybody is going to be empowered to make data-driven decisions in a way that they haven't either felt empowered to or trusted the information that they had access to. And so it's a really, really critical moment for those organizations, especially ones who are a little less data mature. But also, I just want to remind y'all, it's an opportunity to really find and control something in your business when there are so many things that you can't control.
Yeah.
And so, you get to own your data, you get to make some decisions about it, you get to make decisions on what you want to do with it. And you should be having that conversation really early, by the way. But as you build that out, I think later on, in a year or 2 years, you're going to reap so many rewards, even if you just started in one small area. So we get to build on that and kind of carry forward. And so I mentioned this at the start of this conversation. I'd like to lean in on it a little bit more. You shared some thoughts about the concept of monetizing your data. Can you tell me a bit more about what you mean by that concept, and what opportunities are you seeing for construction firms in this regard?
We're privileged to be working with so many companies that are at different stages of data adoption. We work with companies like Suffolk that have been investing in data for years. They built a data team, they have data engineers. And we work with other companies who just started doing analysis and just start figuring out, and they're leveraging us for some of those other things. So we have the benefit to kind of see what the patterns are. And I see a lot of more talk around making sure that you are monetizing that specific investment. So data is not an investment that's supposed to just improve your internal operations. It actually is, it's an investment that increases the capacity to monetize a project. And that comes from the fact that owners are more interested in working with companies that are better at managing themselves, at managing their data. And it's no different than putting a bid out and you have, spelling mistakes and the formatting is wonky, right? That's going to impact the outcome of that bid. And I think it's the exact same thing with data. If you're perceived as tech forward, as you're investing in data, you know how this project outcome is supposed to happen because you can better predict that, then owners are more likely to give you the project. Then on top of it, you're able to charge for that because there's another aspect of this is who owns the data in construction, right? The owners are funding the projects. And it's not uncommon that we talk to a company and they figure out that their contract with the owner, they don't own the data. The owners own the data. They're supposed to be creating it. So that's a missed opportunity for you to gain that knowledge and gain that leverage on how did I perform on this, particular development, this particular location, in this particular condition. So then monetizing that data really means what can you sell that comes with that, right? Can you, very common, we're seeing people selling dashboards, right? Like you can have dashboards, you can have analytics reporting. Those are line items in the bid, right? Like in the same way that you charge for software, we're seeing people charge for those outcomes. And those are the outcomes that owners understand, but what's powering that? Because if it takes a tremendous amount of effort to do it, then it's not a net positive for the company. So a lot of conversation around monetizing is really monetizing that outcome, that analytics outcome, that predictive outcome to owners, and provide that service on top of everything else you provide as a manager of the project, as a developer of the project, as a manager of the finances of the project. You're providing the analytics service for that. And especially in large developments where there's a lot of projects take a long time, you want to be the one providing that. You don't want a third-party company to come in and then just take away that revenue, which we see too. When the GCs can't provide the service, what owners tend to do is that they hire consultants to provide that service. So it's a missed opportunity on monetizing that. And then ultimately, can you aggregate the data and actually monetize the specifics of it, anonymize, and provide a better prediction of things. Owners will trust you more by having access to those data sets, which are unique to your company and your area of operation. If you're a data center developer, do you have any data about data center development that is relevant to that owner that you can sell?
I love that. And we're starting to see more and more owners who are leading these conversations. And I'm really excited by that. I mean, I'm a formal proposal manager. And so I've gotten the bad RFPs, I've gotten the good RFPs, although after doing so many, maybe all RFPs are a little bad in my opinion these days because I don't want to manage them anymore, and I'm thankful that I don't. But it's such an opportunity for that owner to really be prescriptive about what they're going to get from the contractor. And I love the way you're unpacking this, monetizing this data, because you're absolutely right. There's so much work that does go in at a company to create the dashboardings, to convince their teams to standardize in a way that makes that data credible and makes the owner feel informed. But it just makes sense to be able to put that as a line item instead of just this is a betterment that we offer. But it's also a differentiator, because if you can, maybe you're lining on it, there's a cost, but you can show them very clearly, here's the kind of dashboards you're going to get. Here's the amount of information that you're going to get. And here are the choices that you're going to be able to make now that you have access to this information. That owner's going to love you because you're able to give them that visibility, when for years it's always been, well, let's go to the owner's meeting. We're going to shoot from the hip and tell them how our project's going. But the owner didn't really have any ability to click deeper and go, am I being told a story right now? And, and I don't mean to make light of the relationship between the owners and the contractors, but you can continue that relationship after handover as well, because if it's a progressive owner and they go, we want a digital twin or something, oftentimes the owners don't have that experience in-house to manage and continue updating that model. And so now you get to continue a revenue stream that goes beyond handover to continue that relationship, especially if it's a serial owner or builder owner that continues to build. They go, okay, I know you can give me the data you want. Okay, I know you can manage a digital twin in the way that I want. okay, I'm going to sole source you this project, and you don't even have to submit an RFP anymore. You've already got all the systems built in your relationship. There's less overhead to start that project up, and your profit margins go up. It's
Yeah.
all wins at the end of the day. And I recognize it's easy for me to, high level say we're going to do all these things and it's easy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work that goes in.
Happen. Yeah.
But it's a vision that might sound idealized, but it's a vision that's also attainable if you make the right choices, especially if you make them early on in the project.
Yeah, I think just to add to that is just the difference potentially between soft capabilities and hard capabilities, right? In the company, like what are your capabilities with, data sets, or what's your capability with digital twins, right? What are your capabilities as a provider of some of these services that normally would be done by other consulting firms if you don't jump in? So I think it's a revenue stream that is untapped for a lot of companies, but we're seeing that start, especially the more advanced general contractors that have been investing on this for a while, and the smaller ones too that have been nimble and able to get there.
And I like that point too about small versus larger contractors, because I feel many for years have felt that the more advanced data journey, the more advanced technical journeys were really only for those large companies that have a full R&D team and a massive VDC team. But what we're starting to see is the accessibility of these tools is no longer only for the big boys in town to come in and use. It's for everybody. The scale of what you're doing might change depending on what your organization is doing, but the importance of that digital journey and that digitization doesn't change. It actually, I think, increases, and the smaller teams are actually more empowered to make some of these changes because there's not 25 projects they need to change. There's 2. And so now you're in a position to scale and be more nimble about making those changes.
And sometimes the larger companies, they have invested so much in a direction, and now the direction has changed, especially with AI and some of these things. So it kind of levels the playing field. The more technology, the more accessible technology is, the less of an advantage you have by being working on something for 5 years, which might now be something you can stand up in 3 months or 6 months.
And that stings for those big companies because they have these great R&D teams, and sometimes they build tools in house, and suddenly the market changes, or a company releases a feature within their platform that does exactly what you just spent the last 2 years developing internally. And that makes it harder to pivot and make those changes as well in the moment. And I have a lot of empathy for that, because you do spend a lot of time and resourcing there, but also there is a rollover point where you have to go, okay, we need to make a pivot because, maybe this process or this tool or this technology that's being offered to us, it might cost less, or it might integrate better, or allows us to be more nimble and deploy these resources somewhere else who are managing that tool internally before.
Yeah, and I think as you see data evolve over the years, right? Like many, many years ago, we're talking about big data, and then we start talking about Hadoop and data mining, and then time came about, and this cloud, which is really like object storage, all these other things. So if you think about, if you're 10 years ago and you invest a bunch of money and you create a Hadoop cluster, right now you have no advantage. You actually only have problems because nobody's using that technology anymore. So the reality is, it's not about staffing a team necessarily. It's really finding like, what is the way to assemble the skill and the service to provide to your, and start from that end, and then figure out like what can you use to get there fast. So good point.
There's so much room to be innovative, and all these betterments that you can offer, the owners of the world. You start building your menu. Here's all the things we can do. Let me know which ones are appealing to you, so you can kind of be more nimble with all the different owners that you're
and differentiated.
I remember trying to put more innovative betterments into federal proposals when I was still a proposal manager at a federal contractor, and it just didn't work. I mean, obviously you weren't really allowed to. They go, we want this, and you go, we'll give you this. Although the tide is changing there. There's far more room to be innovative in the public sector than there was when, I was responding to those RFPs a decade ago. I'd like to pick your brain a little bit and see, what advice would you give to those construction firms who are just getting started on their data journey and want to improve their decision-making and monetizing the data? If they're feeling overwhelmed, where should they start? Where should they focus?
Yeah. I think it depends on where you are at that point in time. I think like I have like the 5 stages of data adoption slide that I generally use. And the first stage is denial. So you're still in denial. And the last stage is like you're data driven, you're scaling, you're doing all these things. So I think nobody is, it's hard to say that anybody is like in one end of the spectrum and the other one. What we see often is somebody in the company says, oh, we need to do data. And then that scales up into, executive leadership and project managers and, everyone else. And then over time, you figure out, where are you? Like, I need to first, start working on this. And then I think there are stages where you adopt. First is collection. If you're not collecting your data today, you're probably missing out. So first thing is begin collecting the data, all the data. Just think about a phone when you had, cameras that had, you took pictures of things, and then you had to decide exactly what frame you're taking because you only have so many pictures to take. In an iPhone, where you take hundreds of pictures of the same thing and you curate later, it's the exact same concept. Just collect, 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 collect. The cost of storage is minimal, and what you have to do is have as much as you can, and then you find the tools for curation. I would love to have a better tool to create photos on my phone too, right? But that's kind of where we're going because collection is so easy. So first thing is collection. Then I think next stage from there is curation, governance, figuring out, where to put it. And as you do that, simultaneously have to be doing the other thing, which is who's going to buy this? How am I going to use it? What questions do I want to answer? Because those things kind of eventually come together, like your technology roadmap advances, your tools advance to a point where your needs meet, and then you start being effective at it. But in the beginning, just begin. I think that's the first thing. Just begin doing it. And you can begin with a dashboard, start showing that to owners, start getting, feedback. And then what's going to happen is one day you're going to pop that dashboard and the data is going to be wrong and everybody's going to be in disbelief. They're going to be, I don't believe this dashboard.
How dare you do this? I'm never using your dashboard again.
Exactly. Yeah. I changed this yesterday and it's not changed yet. And then at that point, you're going to be like, oh, okay, we need to get a hang of our data. So it can come from either end. I don't aim for perfection ever when I'm building a data architecture, and when we work with clients, or I work with data teams for 10 years now, so I have seen a lot of it. So I just don't try for perfection. Just try to find ways to begin and start leveraging it, and then at the same time start finding out how do you get that into a bid, how do you get paid to do that. So you're not just doing it because it's somebody's passion project. And I would say, there's a roadmap there. Finance data, first thing, right? You got to get your finance data going. And then you have your project data. And then hopefully you centralized already. If you haven't, that's an opportunity to do that. And then is everything else, your scheduling data, your safety data, and it can go in many directions. That's the way I see that develop. And if you're starting from like a VDC angle, you can start there. But those are like, I see those are kind of almost separate things between, starting and then getting to full productivity with data.
It makes sense. And I love the focus of just starting. And it's advice that I've offered many for whatever you're trying to do. If you're sitting in that decision paralysis, you have to do something. If you don't do anything, nothing will change. But also finding that really impactful focus area. If you feel like your safety team has the most robust data strategy right now and is more open to that augmentation, you can start there. You go, okay, we can work through this because they're open to these changes and their data is in a better position than the rest of the house. Yeah. And then you get to use that proof case and you go, hey, look at what we're doing over here. And then you start scaling. Like if you think you're going to boil the entire ocean of your company and boom, we have a full data strategy and all of our standards are in place. And tomorrow our PMs are all going to capture data in this exact way with this exact language. You probably aren't going to start because you're going to freak out, and you aren't going to be in a great position to actually achieve that because there's so many nuances that you're trying to think about all at once. So, narrow that focus, get going, and then build on it from there. And then probably give this guy a phone call because it sounds like he's got some experience here to make this happen. And so I'd like to think a little bit more about what's coming in the future. And I know we talked about AI and ML briefly, or artificial intelligence and machine learning briefly at the beginning. And there's a lot of buzz in this. Of course, Autodesk AI was announced yesterday, but like, what changes do you think we can expect from AI in the near term? And then, maybe the not too distant future?
Yeah, I think it's a great starting point for like thinking about what's the next thing, right? Definitely if you haven't done any data, be careful with AI because there's a whole world of new things that are going to happen there. And it's almost like it's going to evolve too fast. So what we have seen is the tip of the iceberg, and things will be moving really fast because I like to think of AI just like the invention of the computer. You made a computer, you use that computer to make a faster computer, and then use that faster computer to make an even faster computer. That's how, we got so fast computers. If we had used the fast computer to design the first one, it would have been better. So that's where we are with AI. AIs are helping us design better AIs, which means this is going to change radically, right? Like we have an XT computer, a 286 now, and it's going to become an Intel Xeon one day. So just think about it in that way. So there's going to evolve a lot. So definitely don't invest a whole lot of money on, I'm going to train my own AI models. These things, it just can cost so much money. You're going to waste so much time. So leveraging vendors, playing with the tools that the companies are coming up with. I think that's the best way to just start learning. But then I think it comes down to where you want to deploy it, right? Clearly, generative design is the thing. You have to start using generative design. You have to start exploring if you haven't yet. It's super important if you're a design firm. If you're a GC, I think then you're more in the operational side of the projects. And I think that's where AI today can add a lot of value. And we have lots of AI capabilities in our product. And that is all because a lot of construction data is text typed by people. And it's grammatically sometimes correct or incorrect, is coherent because they're people typing it. But most importantly, it contains all the information you want, but it's not accessible. So AI is going to help us get to that stage where, data that is just created in a job site is now informative about risk, safety, quality, everything else. When normally, when you look at the platforms that you're working with, these would be just text boxes that people typed into. And you can control what people type, and that's fine. You shouldn't try to control what people type. You should just find ways to leverage it. And that's, I think, where AI will shine and bring construction data to the next level, I believe.
And it really comes back to the data standards that we're talking about earlier too. Like the consistency, I think, is king as we continue to evolve the tools, because if you're drawing on all of this data and you want to look from project to project, ensuring that your teams understand more thoroughly what your expectations are, but also why, and not just being punitive and prescriptive for the sake of it. You go, hey, look, if we get better at this, if we start capturing our data in this way, I'm going to be able to give you this dashboard or this information that you can make decisions based on with confidence. And the other layer of it, and I'm hearing this via proxy of another person, but Ki Chin talks about this in a way where it's an augmentation with data. It's not a replacement of decision making and experience, because there are so many people who have so much experience, and many times they're making gut feel decisions right now because they are absent of data. But we don't want to eliminate that gut feeling. We want to be able to leverage that experience and improve and augment it with more certainty and more awareness that they didn't have available information for before, or they might not have trusted that information, and you've given them certainty in it to further either make them feel good about the choice they've made, or maybe make a little bit of a different decision as that goes forward. So there's so many layers that we can build into it. But I want to ask you two final questions today. Two of my favorite questions I've been asking everybody this week. First, can you tell me a little bit more about your favorite industry trends that you're seeing, and just more broadly what you think the industry is going to be experiencing in the next 5 to 10 years in construction?
Crystal balls are currently broken, but I'll try my best.
We'll shake it and then realize it's a pineapple or something. It'll be fine.
I think AI is just going to change everything. AI is just really critical. Mostly because we deal with so much unstructured data, and most of our customers ingest tons of PDF, tons of Excel, data from endpoints. So it's a very fragmented landscape. So AI is going to help us make sense of all of this, and it's going to come in many shape and forms, and it will help different roles and different tasks. But I think ultimately it's what you produce and the clarity you bring to the whole industry. That's what's going to be unique. And then I think in general, like, we're now seeing the birth of large language models. And I think what we'll see is the birth of domain-specific models. So imagine that your model is not trained on poetry and Reddit and how to bake a cake, but it's trained on understanding, your industry data. I think that will change dramatically the usage of AI in the industry. So I think, like, AI does change everything. And I think it's critical that we think that this is just the tip of the iceberg. The next AI that's focused on the industry is going to be, providing a lot more value than the AI that you're using today. So it's how much effort you put in and how much you get out. And if it's a little bit of effort and you get a ton of value out, then I think that's the right thing. And that's what it feels like for AI right now.
I'd agree with you there. And we're really at such a unique and exciting moment, because the questions that folks are asking and the ideas and future focused expectations or aspirations for their technology and their data, the conversations I'm having today differ very dramatically from the conversations I was having 3 years ago. And I think it's just this ongoing story of what can we do, but also what's possible with what we're doing. And, it's an augmentation conversation. I know there's always this like hesitation with AI and machine learning and such goes, are you here to replace my job? Like we don't have enough butts or people to fill seats anyway. Like there's not enough butts and seats today for the construction industry at large. We're not taking your jobs away. We're here to augment the work that you do to help you do your job more effectively or more efficiently, or take tasks away that you really don't like doing and take a really long time, so we can be more creative and we can go home at 5 instead of 7 or 8 or 9 at night. And so there's a lot of work to do. And I think we're, as you just pointed out, very early on in that journey, but it's going to be an exciting one. And it's also not going to be, an option for folks. It's going to be a requirement for businesses to continue to be competitive in the future. So I love your vision and aspiration for the industry. One more question for you today. What is one tool that you'll use on all of your projects, no matter what you're working on?
If I'm allowed to say my own product, Toric, we use it for all of our finance, all of our sales work, everything's CS. So that's a great tool, but I think like nobody could live without a phone, and the tools on their telephones that connect them. So that's something I use on every project as well, in every situation. But I think, I think the product we created is changed the way we think about it, the way we build our tools. And we've been using it, very heavily. So I think that's an important one, but it's also a way to think about the future, right? Like what can we build? What is possible to build? What tools are going to come around that could change the way we think? So that's the way I'm thinking about it.
All right. Well, I like it. And it's a good proof case that you're using your tool yourself. If you weren't, you might be like, well, what's going on here? So that's really cool that, you've built something that impacts your own business so heavily, but also, as you just very astutely pointed out, this thing in my hand right now that I'm waving around kind of changed the way that we do go about work. It can be a distraction. Let's be real. There's a lot of stuff on there where you go, all right, I'm going to
podcast.
Yeah, go doom. Yeah, Oh, I'm here ruining everybody's day. But you can go doom scroll if you feel so inclined. But the power of that tool and the access to the information, I think it has an impact, regardless of the industry you're in. So awesome answers. And I've just really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for taking the time here. And for everybody out there listening, of course, this is Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I have a sea of humanity building off to my left, so I want to make sure I do some great plugs. If you do like this show or you think this conversation is interesting, make sure you head over to the Autodesk Construction Cloud YouTube channel. You can find all of our video episodes because we are a video-first podcast. Alternatively, if you are an audio purist, head over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Digital Builder. Of course, I am your trusty host, Eric Thomas. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on Twitter at builder_digital. And without any further ado, goodbye.